Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Talkin Ball Live with Pat Leonard. Monday, May 20th, 2024 edition. The Giants OTAs are underway. Practice number 1, which was closed to the media, in the books. We're going to talk about what we could glean, any insight that came out of the Giants' own coverage of what went on the field in East Rutherford at the training facility. We are only a few days away from our first look at most of the full Giants roster and what it looks like on the field. Still in phase 3, so 7-on-7, 9-on-7, 11-on-11. No live contact yet, with a mini camp coming up in June. But it feels like we're getting late early in this offseason, and that the NFL year, even though nobody wishes away their summer vacation, it does feel like the NFL season is coming up on us quickly and is just around the corner. Jacob reminds everybody to smash that like and sub button for Pat on your way in. Really appreciate you always doing that, Jacob. You can hit that like button, thumbs up while we are live. That reminds Giants and NFL fans who aren't aware of what we do here yet to come in here and join us and join the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard channel. I am the New York Daily News NFL columnist and Giants beat writer. So covering the league, but also close to the Giants. And we're going to talk about Brian Burns today. We're going to talk a little bit about Daniel Jones. We're going to talk more about the 100th year rollout, some more information I have on that for you, and also get into some questions and some insight on what we're looking for, what we think we're going to see in OTAs this spring. May 23rd, I believe, the Thursday practice on deck will be the first time we can walk in there. We've obviously seen the rookies, and now we're going to get to see more of the club together on the field. First, want to tell you guys about our sponsor, Bet Online, and then we're going to get right into the Q&A portion of this. Bet Online is your number one source for all your summer sports this season, from MLB, golf, NBA, and NHL playoff stats. All the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds in just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Bet Online, where the game starts. Where we start, Michael says, good evening, Pat. Good evening, Michael. Good to see you. Antonio, how are you? Good to see you as well. And before I get to our first question from Antonio right after this, I want to tell you my primary point coming into this Talkin Ball Live episode is about Brian Burns, the prized acquisition from the Carolina Panthers, the Giants trading for Burns in the offseason in March and giving him a monster 5-year, $141 million contract extension. He was looking for that type of contract in Carolina. Obviously, a lot of losing in Carolina, and the Panthers with a lot of turnover. So Burns finds a new home. He said it was a pleasant surprise, that he was shocked at first, but that he's glad he's in New York now. Of course, the Giants spent some significant capital as well on the trade, trading that high second-round pick in that deal to get him. But I wanted to talk about Burns because I finally got to meet him in person for the first time at the Dexter Lawrence charity softball game in Pomona, New York. Great job, by the way, by Joe Ruback, license plate guy, Dexter Lawrence, Brandon Jacobs, now friend of the show, doing the podcast to promote the event. Was a great interview. They raised $60,000 for St. Christopher's Inc. It's a nonprofit for adolescents who need assistance. And that's just great work by those three gentlemen and their significant others, their support team, their support structure, and all the former and current Giants who showed out in support, and the fans who showed up in the stands to support the event and to pay money to a good cause. And we'll talk more. Definitely had a good meetup with some of our loyal fans here in the live chat in person at the stadium where the New York Boulders play. And so that was a really great experience. But Brian Burns walked over to the dugout where the media was assembled, and he talked to us for about 5 minutes. And if you're on this podcast right now, you may have already listened to his interview on our YouTube page here. The full interview, you can find it here on the page. But Burns really stood out to me as somebody who was embracing and ready for the New York spotlight. And I thought that was really refreshing to see, because this is a guy who's basically never played in a market like this. Played his college ball down in Florida, played in Carolina so far in his NFL career. He's an elite athlete. He's a former first-round pick. So it's not like pressure or expectations are new to him, but he spoke so openly about how Giants fans are passionate and have high expectations for the team right now this season. And he understands the pressure that comes with it, that's expected with the contract that he has. And it really feels like he's doing his part right away to hit the ground running. And he did mention, hey, listen, I'm young. Dexter Lawrence is young. Kayvon Thibodeau's young. Hopefully we're good together for a long time. It's not just about this year. But I think his actions and his words are speaking loudly. He and Kayvon Thibodeau walking essentially stride for stride next to each other into the stadium. And Burns said they basically don't go anywhere without each other. They're working out only together. So if it's time for Burns to work out, he finds Thibodeau and makes sure he's in the gym with him and vice versa. And that struck me as important for the development of Kayvon Thibodeau, the number 5 overall pick in Joe Shane's first draft. And it really, I sensed talking to Burns, talking to Dexter Lawrence, and hearing about how it's gone so far, that Burns is possibly more of a veteran leader stepping to the forefront as a face of the franchise, along with a young, hopefully, rookie in Malik Nabers. But you think about Malik Nabers, only 20 years old. So he's the new face of the franchise as far as what you're marketing to fans, most likely, that you're trying to have a modern offense. You're trying to open it up. You're trying to have this explosiveness. And he's your first round pick, somebody that you're hoping can take you basically into the next wave of this franchise. But he's still only 20. He's going to have to lead more with just catch and run, score touchdowns, make plays. But you're going to need big veterans, guys who have who are cerebral, who have their finger on the pulse of what the team needs. And we really talked about this, about how other than Bobby Okereke, we're kind of waiting to see who is going to step into those roles all across the roster. And I think what I learned meeting Brian Burns in those 5 minutes is that he's capable of it. I know it's only a quick interaction, but I sense somebody who, even he was asked about how to defend screens and the physical capabilities of the talent that he and Lawrence and Thibodeau and that defensive front have to go get the ball on screen passes. And he said, well, screen passes, that's more of a mental hurdle than a physical one. He said that's more about understanding game situations, reading what teams like to do, understanding where you are in space. I think it kept coming back in Burns' comments to his mental approach, his routine, his process, his preparation, right? Even the fact that the Giants essentially have him shoulder to shoulder with Thibodeau shows me they believe that he's going to rub off on him in a good way. And so I'm excited about Burns more so than I was prior to that interaction, just because it looks like you're not going to have to worry about him, right? And I know that should be a given what they invested in him. But sometimes you go all out for talent and you end up with talent that is lacking some other key pieces in the makeup. And I just like how Burns carried himself, how he represented himself, how he represented the Giants, how much he was interacting with fans, signing autographs. And that was something you heard about him in Carolina, that he was very involved in the community, that he was open, that he was entertaining even until the contract situation got in the way. Like we remember how that happened with Saquon Barkley in New York. That kind of happened similarly with Brian Burns in Carolina, where just became a situation where everybody knew maybe where it was headed, right? So that said, that's what I wanted to open up with. That was the primary point I had coming out of that night. We learned that Wan'Dale Robinson is very good at baseball, or at least that he can hit. It was good to see Justin Pugh there, who's not on the Giants right now, but frankly, I think he would be a good guy to just bring back, even if only for a solid depth piece on the field, but also to be that glue guy again, right? Help that leadership component. So with that, I'll open it up to questions. We'll get to Antonio first as I sip my Angels envy here and we get started on Talkin Ball Live with Pat Leonard. Antonio says, what are your expectations for Micah McFadden in year 3? I think if Micah plays the way he did in the first 3 games of last season and limits the missed tackles, I think you get a guy who helps you stop the run and brings the type of toughness and energy that this team needs across the board. I think that Isaiah Simmons, part of the reason he ended up being useful for the Giants last year, and perhaps part of the reason he ends up re-signing and could be useful again is because he's the yin to McFadden's yang. You have one guy who's more of a plug the hole, run stopper, hard-nosed player, and then another guy who plays better in space, more athletic, better blitzer, better in coverage against running backs. So you mix, or better in coverage in general. And so you mix and match those things. I don't think it's fair to ask McFadden to be more than what he is, because like what he is can be sufficient as far as a complementary piece on a team, right? You know, ideally, I think you'd even like help on special teams from a linebacker like that. But bottom line is, I think Micah is a guy that you need him to not miss tackles. Like that was one thing towards the middle of the year you started to see. He like, listen, in that Dallas game when they got blown out 40-0, I remember distinctly McFadden was one of the only people I circled on the roster and had notes about during that game. And I said, oh, I like how this guy played, right? There weren't many guys on the roster you could say that about. He was one of them. You know, I think if I remember correctly, I feel like he was good in that San Francisco game in several key moments. And, you know, his attitude, that toughness, that grind, I like it. So I think my expectations are same strong start, you know, just concentrate on making the simple plays 100% of the time. And I think Shane Bowen's job is not to put a player like Micah McFadden in positions where his weaknesses are highlighted. And that goes for any player. But I just think like you got to use a guy like that correctly. And what you ask of him is to be sound in the running game primarily. Hunter says, good evening, Pat. What's good? How was the meetup? Hunter, it was great. Out at the stadium. Saw my guy Joe. Met Scooby. It was great to meet Scooby. Giant Singh, got to meet Giant Singh. That was amazing. Really just a lot of supportive fans, content creators. Giants Chronicles, my man. I had a great conversation about the Giants, about the Giants media, about the beat, about the whole landscape, what it's like to cover the team. It was so nice to talk in person. And really for me to say thank you to you guys in person, like I always do on here, that I'm so glad that this community is continuing to grow and that I think a large portion of the fan base appreciates and recognizes kind of the direct, honest, and open way that I try to do things. And it's really just awesome to receive that validation and then be able to share with you what I know and also my appreciation. And of course, I don't know everything. So, you know, there's plenty of topics that we can bat around here and we don't know for sure which way these things are going to go, whether it's trade rumors or conversations or developments on the roster, depth chart, that kind of thing. So I might have insight on some things, but other things might be topics that we're kind of workshopping together. And so I think you guys have really helped me with that too. Keep like a constant dialogue, you know, together running on what's developing with the team. Bis4 Vegan says, glad I hit the notification here. Yeah, no, that's a great thing about YouTube and about what we have going on the channel. You can set notifications on for the YouTube channel. And so when I set a live to go, like we do on Mondays and Thursdays at 9 p.m., you will get a reminder on your phone earlier and then closer up to the time that we go live. And it's sharp. It doesn't bother you. It's not like 100 different notifications on your phone, but it's really sharp and it gives you kind of like that reminder, let's go. And so I'm glad that was a help. Jacob says, could the Hard Knocks be the reason we haven't seen much draft room content? That's possible, Jacob. Though we did end up seeing Malik Nabers' call, right? But it was definitely strange how we were kind of waiting on that for a while and waiting on a lot of that type of content. I mean, first round pick, you know, it was a little bit odd that didn't come out quickly. But Jacob, I do think that that has to be part of the reason why. There's definitely, you know, it would surprise me if there wasn't a connection there. Especially if any of it's very good, you know, then you'd have to think that the top of the cream of the crop clips that they would normally say, this is what's going to go viral on social, then that's what HBO is going to want to roll with as Hard Knocks gets underway. So I think that's a safe assumption. G-Man says, Pat, what's going on, brother? G-Man, good to see you. Welcome back. Luann says, Giants defense will kick butt, and Daniel Jones and Malik Nabers will be a dangerous threat. Interesting. Luann's always our eternal optimist in the chat. We appreciate her as always. And listen, when I had dinner with Daniel Jones a few years ago, one of the things we talked about was about, Odell Beckham Jr. and when he was here, and the fact that unfortunately he and Daniel Jones didn't get a chance, to overlap as teammates, and Daniel Jones never got to throw to Odell when he was in his prime as Giants quarterback. And, Daniel takes it as it comes. Like he's not a whiner. I mean, that's not his style, but it's definitely, he understands that would have been a special thing. And I think even though it's not OBJ, Malik Nabers is his version of that now. It's his opportunity to have that true number one, the guy who opens things up on the field, who opens up the offense, who gives the quarterback some layups, right, as they say, and makes the quarterback look better because he can turn 5-yard catches into 30-yard catch and runs. So we're talking about Daniel Jones now, and Joel says, hi, Pat. How did Daniel Jones look as reported that he took some snaps on 7-on-7? Yeah, so Joel, unfortunately, I was not there to see it. The media, so the Giants and all NFL teams, I believe the rule is that they have to make every 3 OTAs. Of every 3 OTA practices, they have to make at least one available, right? So the Giants do the bare minimum. They make one available every 3, and then you lose the 10th. So every Thursday, we get to go in for the next 3 weeks and see these things in person. But for the first OTA practice, we have to rely on the Giants' internal practice report. But, to be fair, there were a lot of photos, and there was a good report from Dan Solomon with the Giants about who was on the field and who was participating, and the fact that Daniel Jones was throwing in 7-on-7 to players such as Malik Nabers and Wan'Dale Robinson stands out because those are obviously first-team wide receivers he's throwing to. And also 7-on-7 indicates something that Brian Daboll did not share with us in the rookie minicamp. We asked him if Daniel Jones was going to be on the field like that with teammates in any capacity during the spring, and he was not interested in answering that question. So even though it's a minor step towards what we're looking for here, this is a step in the right direction for Daniel Jones. Now, that said, I don't know if you guys got a chance to look through the photo gallery on the Giants website, but they posted something like 145 photos of the practice today. And a few things stood out. So let's start with the quarterbacks. Number 1, Daniel Jones, we know, threw in 7-on-7. But if you look at some of the photos of the team with a quarterback under center, with John Michael Schmitz snapping the ball, Drew Lock is the quarterback under center in the photos that we can see. So you can safely assume, it's not unfair to assume, sitting here as we do, and it's closed to us at the moment, it's safe to put together that at the moment in Daniel Jones's rehab, he's involved in these practices in some capacity with first teamers, but that Drew Lock is taking first team reps as well. And possibly at the moment, it's Daniel Jones only 7-on-7 and Drew Lock taking the 11-on-11. And I don't think that's unfair to assume based on the way the Giants reported it as well. And the Giants reported that the hope continues to be that he will be ready, Daniel Jones, for the start of training camp. So that sounds like everything's trending for him is in a positive direction to be participating. But simultaneously, you have Drew Lock getting meaningful snaps with starters. Now, Drew Lock was at this Dexter Lawrence charity softball game, while players like Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns, who were requested by the media, walked over and did interviews. Drew Lock did not speak, just putting it out there, something to be aware of. I do think that this is a delicate situation that the Giants want to balance. They don't want to put too much on Lock. They don't want to say the wrong things. They know it's already delicate. Daniel Jones already has enough pressure on him. There's a portion of the fan base that isn't even interested in seeing him play quarterback for them anymore. So that's a touchy subject for sure internally, but it's our job to report on what's happening, and we will get to the truth one way or another. Number two, on the offensive line, there were pictures, okay? There were pictures that appeared to show, like there was one photo that appeared to show Evan Neal, right tackle, John Runyon Jr., right guard, John Michael Schmidt, center. And I believe I saw a photo that had Runyon Jr. at right guard, John Michael Schmitz at center, and Jermaine Illuminor at left guard. Okay. Now, Aaron Stinney, who knows that they may be having a rotation at left guard right now between Stinney and Illuminor. We will see. There was also a photo that showed Brian Burns getting ready to rush the passer with Josh Azudu over at left tackle, presumably with the second team offensive line. Okay. With Stinney next to him. So nothing is set in stone here. But this is something that, now to give you guys a good look into how we do our job, when I'm watching practice and I'm watching the field, there are rules about what we can and can't report. So there are plenty of times where I can see plain as day that the offensive line left to right looks like something. But the rules dictate that I can't just walk out of practice, in week one and tell you guys on Wednesday what the offensive line is left to right. That's rules of, governing how the media can cover the Giants or cover the NFL teams during the weeks. But you can find creative ways to indicate, where people are lined up, or at least what expectations are being met and what expectations are not. But to me, I think it's fascinating and doesn't surprise me that Runyon Jr. is lined up on the right in some of those photos I see. Or Jermaine Illuminor at left guard indicates what we have talked about, what I've reported to you guys since January, basically, that Evan Neal was going to get a chance to win the right tackle job and protect it before it's taken away from him, if it ever is. Also, bear this in mind, Theo Johnson, the rookie tight end, if I'm not mistaken, in one of those photos was lined up along with that offensive line and Drew Lock at quarterback. So, we saw, but, take it for what it's worth, because we also saw a photo of Tommy DeVito jumping and celebrating with Devin Singletary in a picture as if he may have thrown a touchdown to him in certain periods. So everyone can be worked into different drills. Nothing set in stone. It's very early, but this is obviously all very interesting. Ash says, what's up, Pat? Good to see you. What, as a reporter, do you look for in these OTAs? That's a really good question, Ash. What I look for, Ash, is, first of all, attendance and player health. They sound obvious, but you have to be diligent and mindful in approaching those types of facts and nailing them down when you're out there watching, to have a thorough evaluation and observation period of a practice. So we've all had days as reporters, Ash, where you see a ton of things, you notice a lot, you make 5 different observations that other reporters haven't, but something major happens and you miss it because it happened on a different field while you were watching something else or whatever it is. And then sometimes it turns out that you had a lot of great insight, but you missed the story of the day, right? That's something that can happen to any reporter. And so my number one thing is to be extremely cognizant and as aware as I can be of who's on the field, who's not. If they're not on the field, where are they? Are they in the training room? Are they not with the team right now? Did they decide not to be there? Is it contract related, or are they nursing something, right? Are there injuries? Who's injured? What are the injuries? Those types of things. Outside of those kind of starter packs that you kind of walk into practice trying to master, you're also trying to evaluate who's playing with who's getting what opportunities with whom, right? Where are guys being worked at? So, for example, if you guys all expect Jermaine Illuminor to be working at right tackle, but we then see he's working at left guard, or we go into training camp, for example, and you're expecting Daniel Jones to take all the first team reps and Drew Lock to be the backup, and then they're splitting first team reps, right? Those are all developments that they happen quicker at practice than you think. So you have to know where to look. You have to know how the practices are going to be run. You have to even know something as seemingly small, Ash, as where to stand during practices. So especially when they start using all the different fields, you have to think to yourself, okay, I'm walking out here. Where is offense going to be? Where's defense? Where's the live team period going to be? Where's the best place for me to get videos so fans who are not at practice or not at training camp or not at OTAs can see it for themselves? Where's the best vantage point so that I can actually watch what's happening on the field and evaluate it? And also matchups, Ash. Like, for example, good on good matters more than anything. So if Brian Burns is rushing the passer against Josh Azudu in a live period, that means less than what he does when he's rushing against Andrew Thomas, right? For example. So that's just one example of you want to see how Malik Nabers does against Deonte Banks, right? You don't want to necessarily see how he's going to do against a backup slot corner as much as you want to see him against a starter. And so those are the types of things you look for. And obviously nothing's live right now. So it's less of an evaluation period than training camp would be, but you're still looking for those things. All right, looks like we got our first super chats and super stickers. Jay Jan checks in with a $1.99. Thank you, Jay Jan, always supporting the channel. He says, I feel good about O-line except right tackle and right guard. Yeah, I think, Jay Jan, they need to get it figured out quickly and early. I think that John Michael Schmitz does have to get better at center. There's no question about it. You hope that his amount of experience in college and how he got thrown into the fire last year and grows from that helps him, right? So I do think that it's not a guarantee that, the center position is solid. He needs to continue to earn that. But I share your confidence that he can do that. But I totally see your point, is that you feel like with Andrew Thomas at left tackle healthy, and then Illuminor, Stinney, whoever's winning that left guard job, and Schmitz at center, you feel stronger about that than the uncertainty of the right side, with the fact, really what it boils down to ultimately is, can Evan Neal be the guy you drafted him to be? I think that's really where it settles in. And that's where it starts and finishes. John Runyon Jr. at right guard, obviously he said at his introductory presser that he prefers left guard, but he played right guard down the stretch in Green Bay. And it looked, at least today in pictures we saw, that he was at right guard. So we'll see where that goes. He needs to be solid for them. And, they paid him in free agency. And so not only do I think he needs to be solid, I think as they are comprised as a unit, as an offensive line, he needs to step up as a leader. And I definitely have talked to enough people who believe that he can do that. And so, I think if Runyon steps up into that leadership role and Neal plays well, that can alleviate some of the concerns. All right. Rich checks in with a $4.99 super chat. Rich says, sup, Pat? Great meeting you at the LPG event. Rich, great meeting you as well, man. That was awesome. He says, I'm in the minority, but I think we need Waller back to take some pressure off Nabers as a rookie pass catcher. Rich, thank you for coming over and saying hi. Rich, another loyal supporter and follower of the channel that it was thrilled to run into. And we came over, we were standing there near Gary Myers's table where he was selling his book, Once a Giant, over my shoulder here. And, we were talking, and Rich walked up, said how much he enjoys, my coverage and the channel. And I thanked Rich for participating so often, supporting the channel as he is now. And, being such a diehard Giants fan. Rich is the kind of person and fan who makes this channel run. So thank you, Rich. So he said he thinks the Giants need Waller back to take pressure off Nabers as a rookie pass catcher. Rich, I definitely think your point is a strong one, which is that as much as Nabers is an exciting player, he's not going to flip the table of this offense by himself. He could help take the top off defenses and supercharge them in key moments with some big plays. And he's a playmaker. So he's going to make plays for this offense that we haven't seen at the receiver position in a while. But no matter what you think of Saquon Barkley, especially now that he went to the Eagles, that's a major weapon that made the offense go. And also, this is a key component, force the defense to key on him, right? Defenses now do not have to key on the Giants running back as an enormous, explosive, game-changing weapon. So because of that, you need somebody else on the field to be a mismatch, to be a problem, to force defenses to say, this was going to be our plan, but now we have to adjust because we need more size to contend with Waller in the middle, or we need that size and speed to contain with to deal with Darren Waller as a tight end. Rich, I have no confidence that Waller is going to play this season, but I don't know anything official because we know that he hasn't said anything official yet. So unfortunately, we don't have an answer to that. He was not pictured or portrayed in any of those pictures from OTAs. And frankly, it is so late in the game to not have a legitimate answer on this. It really is. But I think you make a really good point. And thank you so much for the super sticker. Guys, remember, you can purchase a super chat or super sticker, and that's a way to have your comment or question addressed or answered first. It jumps to the top of the queue, and we answer or address it immediately. Great way to support the channel. If you don't want to do that, no problem. Just hit the thumbs up or drop a question or just watch, whatever you want to do. But we really love having you all here, and thank you for making this such a great chat. Bees to the East, good to see you again. G-Man says, Pat, how much do you think the Giants will reveal on offseason Hard Knocks? G-Man, those things are always a little bit propaganda because, listen, the league and the team are involved with deciding what gets in and gets out, along with HBO and the producers of these shows. So it ends up being a watered down version of the truth. But they have to show you enough for you to feel like it was worth your time and for it to be entertaining, right? You want it to be entertaining and informative. That's what like the producers and the mucky mucks in our business and media, especially like if you're talking about radio, podcasts, those types of things, they say you need an entertainment element and you need an information element. And so that's how I look at Hard Knocks for the Giants is, do I expect them to show Wink Martindale leaving the Giants for good and walking out on Brian Daboll and the Giants? No, I do not expect them to show that. Do I expect them to show Brian Daboll giving Mike Kafka and Shea Tierney promotions after the worst offensive season in recent memory and one of the worst offensive seasons in Giants history? Don't know. That would be a bold move. I do think it's going to be a lot about Joe Shane's and the personnel department's kind of scouting process. I would assume they're going to hammer the point of collaborative efforts and collaboration between Shane and Daboll, and they're going to talk about alignment. And I think it's going to be a way for the Giants to get their message out. That's how I view it. So, frankly, I'm not optimistic that we're going to learn a ton that the team doesn't want us to know. If that makes sense. Evan Alcazar says, do you root for the Giants to win? I don't root for any teams in the NFL, Evan, because as a reporter, that's not my job, and it would be unprofessional for me to do that. I do, however, like when the team I cover wins and I go and cover more games and I cover playoff games. Like when I covered the Rangers, let's put it this way, Evan. When I covered the Rangers in the NHL for 5 seasons, at the time, I was not rooting for the team at all. I was covering them with a critical eye. I was covering them as well as I could. And they won a lot. They went to 3 conference finals. They went to 1 Stanley Cup final. And I'm very grateful for the experience. And listen, I butted heads with some people like in the PR department sometimes. There were some articles that people in the team loved that I wrote. Players loved that I wrote. I had really good relationships around the organization, especially with a lot of the players. There were also times where people said, Pat, what the hell, right? You have those conversations. But overall, it was an experience that I have great relationships with most of the people I worked with there, and vice versa, going back the other way. And now that I'm not covering the team, I pull like hell for them, man. I pull like hell. Like, I'm watching the playoffs right now, and you guys know I grew up in Philadelphia, right? So I didn't grow up rooting for the Rangers, but I root for the Rangers now. Like, I watch every minute of their games when I can. The only games I haven't watched recently is when I've been on with you guys. So, Evan, I guess I don't know if that answers your question, but like, that's being just totally transparent, you know. And if I jumped in right now to go cover the Rangers in the conference finals, or I started writing columns and I was writing about the Stanley Cup, my job would not be to root for them there. It'd be to cover it, right? But certainly I have an emotional connection to that team and that organization. And there were a lot of important things that happened in my life while I was covering that team. And it's kind of intertwined with who I am, right? And so the Giants, similarly, like, they're a team right now that it's not my role to root for them. But if they won and we got to experience a lot of great shared memories together, their organization, people in their organization, me, like, it would form some sort of bond down the road, right? You would feel like a connection to that. I don't know if I would root for them, because I might just keep covering them and keep covering the NFL. And that's not my role to root. But, I would say this way, like, for example, in the Super Bowl this year, I felt like the Chiefs were going to win the game. And so I didn't have a rooting interest in the game. Either way, either team won, there were connections to the Giants and also just great NFL stories on both sides that I was looking forward to covering, talking about, but just in my investment was, I felt like I had a read on how the game was going to go and who was going to win. So maybe that's rooting for like a result that you had predicted, but that's the farthest I go with the NFL, I guess. But I always say, Evan, a rising tide lifts all boats. And I know you guys have probably heard that before, but the Giants have done a lot of losing while I've been covering the team. And, Mike Garafolo, who used to cover the Giants, once said, I believe he said on Jordan Ronon's podcast with ESPN, Breaking Big Blue, which is a great podcast. You guys should listen if you don't. But Mike Garafolo said on Jordan's podcast years ago, he was talking to Jordan about how he got from, gradually from covering the NFL, from covering the Giants, being on the Giants beat, to eventually working up his way to the NFL Network and Insider and all that. And I remember distinctly Mike saying on that podcast that he was fortunate, he felt, to be covering the Giants at a time when they were ascending. And there was plenty of drama going on and, questions about different things with the organization and pressure on Tom Coughlin and those types of things, Eli Manning. But then obviously they end up winning 2 Super Bowls, figuring it out, great pass rush, great defense, big plays in big games and all that. And that was a driving force behind Mike also doing great work simultaneously, team success, high profile, Mike doing great work. And then you end up, continuing to move up, continuing to grow professionally. And so, that's kind of a good thing for everybody when the team wins. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I tried to answer that as best I can. All right. Looks like we got Ryan says, hey, Pat, coming in late here. So if the Hooker topic has been covered, I apologize. But thoughts on a potential trade? So, Ryan, that's really funny you say that, because Joe and I were talking, Joe and I think maybe Rich and Scooby and a few others, Chronicles, we were all talking. Now, let me be very clear, not reporting anything here, okay? But I floated the question to the Giants fans during our meetup at the stadium. I said, what do you guys think of Hendon Hooker? And they said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, you look at this and you say, okay, the Giants have Darius Slayton, who is a wide receiver who, he hasn't requested a trade. He wants some improvements on his contract. Maybe that happens, or maybe it doesn't and he just shows up. But I was talking to a source with another team recently, and that we were talking about, listen, if Darius Slayton ended up possibly getting traded, what would be a fit for him? Like, just workshopping it, talking about it, nothing more. We were looking at rosters, and this person said the Lions might make sense. And because we were looking at their roster construction. Josh Reynolds is no longer there. I believe their third receiver after Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jamison Williams. And Williams has kind of still been figuring it out. But I think Khalif Raymond is their third receiver at the moment. You imagine Darius Slayton being a good fit in a dome on a team like that, being the 3, right? Like, that's what I've talked to you guys about. If he was going to get traded, I would think that it would be to be a really strong 3, maybe a 2 on some teams, but really a strong 3 probably on a contender. That would make sense to me. And so I was just floating the idea, Hendon Hooker, what if you could figure out a way to get Darius Slayton to Detroit and try to get Hendon Hooker in a deal? And obviously a pick would have to go over to Detroit, you would think, as well, if you're acquiring a quarterback, a young quarterback, a guy on a rookie contract, a guy they like, right, that they drafted. Now, I'm not reporting anything on this because the fact of the matter is, if Detroit has no interest in trading Hendon Hooker, which I don't know the answer to that, Jared Goff signing that extension obviously seems to indicate that Hendon Hooker is not going to find his way on the field. Now, that doesn't mean that a team like the Lions doesn't want to keep a young player, developmental player, especially at a position that important like quarterback. They might just want to keep grooming and developing Hendon Hooker because you're always one snap and injury away from needing that guy, especially in the modern NFL where it just feels like almost every team practically outside of a handful every year now goes to their second or even third quarterback, as the Giants had to do last year. So this is a completely moot point if Detroit isn't interested in dealing him, right? But I can tell you definitively that the Giants had interest in Hendon Hooker coming out of the draft. I reported that at the time. And they didn't end up taking him. Obviously, he had the injury. They were seeing how far he would fall. They don't end up getting him. But the Giants had interest in him coming out. And Darius Slayton, if he doesn't end up getting a new contract and for some reason ends up leading to a trade request, or that's the ultimate end result, Detroit is a strong fit and a possible likely fit for Darius. Remember, the Detroit Lions and Giants also did joint practices last year, right? So, and I believe they play in the preseason this year here in East Rutherford. Maybe they get that going again. All that is to say, maybe those guys, maybe those teams have a reason to kind of match up and help each other solve each other's problems, but we don't know that yet. Salient says, please share, like, and subscribe. Let's get Pat to 10,000 followers. Salient, thank you so much for the super sticker there and for saying that. FYI, guys, we are, no joke, this channel over the last 28 days has almost 100,000 views. So that's between the live chats, our podcast videos, and our YouTube shorts. Almost 100,000 views of this channel in the last 28 days. That's thanks to you guys. Really appreciate that. And D-Kit says he didn't get the notification for the chat today. Okay, I'm sorry about that, D-Kit. I got to look into that. Hit up YouTube headquarters here, man. That's BS. He says a rising tide can also drown you. What's the mood of the team in Giantland? Folks happy to see Jones moving around? D-Kit, I would describe it as loose but focused. And loose being like they know it's still early and they're trying to set a positive tone, right? Not loose in a bad way, loose in like an optimistic way. But that's part of what I got from our conversation with Brian Burns. He almost invited the conversation about high expectations, about how big things are going to be. Like he essentially welcomed it, broached that subject. And, I think that guys like Bobby Okereke, Brian Burns, I think John Runyon Jr., like I said, is a guy who's probably going to end up stepping up and needs to step up. But from what I hear, will, I think it sounds like guys are trying to lead the team in the right direction. As far as Daniel being on the field, yes, optimism there. I'm more curious about what they think of Drew Lock, though, because I know that all the players respect Daniel as a player and a person and how hard he works and takes big hits and gets up and lives to see another day and all that. So I know they respect him as a person, but I'm curious what they feel about the full quarterback room. That's something to answer Ash's question earlier too about OTAs and what I'm looking at. That's more what I'm curious about as well. But D-Kit, thanks for always supporting us here. Really appreciate you. Chris says, good evening. Good evening, Chris. Great to see you. Let's see. Luann says, the defense is going to be dangerous. Watch out, Hurts and Dak. Let's see. Marjorie says, seems Brian Burns enjoyed himself. Oh, he was very much feeling it, enjoying that time. And he was very friendly with the fans, signing for all the kids. Loved seeing it. Mel's great to see you. Savage Steve, he says, what are we drinking, Pat? This is a little Angels Envy bourbon. Did a little bit of the Bourbon Trail with my brother, what was that, 2 years ago now, I think, down in Kentucky, and hit up the Angels Envy Distillery among many others, and can't recommend it highly enough. Great trip. Let's see. NFL Beast of the East says, what are your thoughts on the effect of the contract of Burns when they need to sign Kayvon? Potential landmine there, Beast of the East, no doubt about it. I think it reflects that they felt like they needed to go pay for that player, even though they drafted Kayvon to be that player. So I think that's worrisome. Then again, if that player can help Kayvon continue to ascend and they can both become that guy, now there's no such thing as too many great pass rushers, right? So I do think it was a desperately aggressive move. And what I mean by that is I like aggressive to try to get better when you need better players and you need A-list players. But it also struck me by because it was an overpay in the market, in addition to trading for the player, giving up assets, not to mention the contract, I think it reflected where the Giants are as a team and how much they needed to upgrade immediately. But I do like what I saw from Burns this weekend. And as far as Kayvon goes, I think Kayvon's going to need to do his best as he comes up available to negotiate an extension after his third season, as NFL players are. That could become touchy, right? Now, it'll be a great problem to have, though, if Kayvon has a supersonic season and wants to get paid. And he points at Brian Burns and says, what, you're going to pay him and not me? Listen, if we're here after next season and the Giants had a great year and their pass rush dominated and Kayvon wants his money, that's a great place to be. But where you don't want to be is in that position where Kayvon wants his money and feels like he got jumped in line and the team didn't have a good year and it's not good vibes. And maybe the contract he's looking for hasn't been fully earned, right? So there's a way that it can work out in a positive way. And there's a way that it can work out in a bad way or negative way, worrisome way. We Are Penn State Reds says, love the show. Thanks, Reds. He says, wondering if you think Theo Johnson starts the year as tight end 1. I know it depends on Waller. I think definitely, and you know this too, following Penn State, but Theo Johnson as a blocker, I think can help them right away. And obviously we know that he's a red zone threat. For rookies, a lot of times the game moves so much faster. So like a Daniel Bellinger, for example, he was a guy that was supposed to be kind of what they just drafted Theo Johnson to be, but he struggled, on blocks, constantly holding. Johnson, I think, can run better than Daniel Bellinger as a receiver as well. So you're looking for kind of like a more athletic and sounder, more disciplined version of that. I do think there's a world where he can end up as tight end 1, though. They did acquire or signed Chris Manhertz and Jack Stoll from the former Bronco, former Eagle, respectively. These are guys that have been in the league and are reliable, especially run blockers. Stoll receiver as well, but definitely guys that you're trying to count on to help your offensive line protect and then also chip in the passing game. So I think Theo's going to be groomed to be that guy. But definitely the Giants are towing a line between trying to develop these young guys and also trying to win immediately and kind of defend themselves and save their jobs a little bit. But Theo, to me, especially with how nasty he is as a blocker and can be, I think he has the potential to grab that spot if he shows out. Ash says, do you have any expectations for Darian Beavers this year? Does he make the roster? That's iffy. I mean, Carter Coughlin re-signing, surprised me. But that puts another linebacker there as far as like he's going to be on special teams. He's going to be on the roster. And Carter wanted to play defense or at least have a better shot at playing defense than he did last year. So the fact that Carter Coughlin resigned tells me that he believes he's going to get a genuine chance to play defense for this team in the regular season. And if that's the case, that means there's 3 linebackers ahead of Darian Beavers now, right? Bobby Okereke, Micah McFadden, and Carter Coughlin at a minimum, right? Not to mention some of the other additions they've made, guys who are going to compete at that spot. As a draft pick, obviously, you're trying to make it work. Also, you have to think that the Beavers is finally closer to himself, right? Coming off the injury, having a healthier offseason. So he'll get every opportunity. He obviously looked really good as a rookie in training camp before he got hurt. But certainly that's the type of player at the moment. Like I would throw Bellinger in this bucket too. Like these are guys who need to put up or shut up right now. Let's see. Mel says Green Bay linebacker we had recently, his peak, if he keeps working hard, was a closer in the run game. Yeah. Oh, Blake Martinez. Right. Michael Sarasso says that's pretty damn quick for DJ, even if it was just 7-on-7 drills. Isn't it only 8 to 9 months for his ACL surgery? Yes, it is quick, Michael. And so 7-on-7 is just that, 7-on-7. No one, you're dropping back with no pass rush and throwing on air, right? So, but definitely encouraging, Michael, for sure, and does feel like early, but that's encouraging. Marjorie says, this format is the absolute best way to get to know you. I truly enjoy your show and knowledge. Thank you, Marjorie. I appreciate that. And honestly, Marjorie, like, listen, we all have, nobody's perfect, but I do like these because like, I'm the guy, like if I played a game of cards, even if I tried to cheat, like you would see it on my face before, like I could even like play my hand. Like I wear my heart on my sleeve as much as I can. Who you are meeting during these live chats is who I am. I promise you. Like it is. Hunter says, was Slayton a no-show today? Didn't see him in any of the photos, Hunter. Do not believe he's there, but we'll see for sure on Thursday. Savage Steve says, you think the Giants may be interested in any more trades, or do you get the sense this is pretty much the roster that's going into training camp? More likely veteran salary benefit stuff, Savage Steve. That workshopped Hendon Hooker, Darius Slayton trade idea was just that, a workshopped idea. But, maybe something like that to get like a developmental quarterback into the building, I would love to see. I think they have to constantly keep looking at those types of things. Kyler says, Pat, I saw that Jones was 8th most likely to win comeback player of the year. I think 25-1. What would he have to do to keep his job, let alone win that award? Kyler, I think the number one thing Daniel has to do to keep his job and win that award is to, like Michael said, hey, it's great that he's on 7-on-7 this early, right? With the knee injury, the ACL, it's pretty early in his recovery. But we've talked about this. He is an athletic quarterback whose legs and running ability is a huge part of him playing at his highest level. And so he's not Lamar Jackson, but as Saquon called him, Vanilla Vic, right? Like a great nickname, right? And I still remember when that slipped out and like Saquon got videoed saying that, and they tried to like keep it under wraps, but it was, nope, too late. It's out. So I think Kyler, he has to be mobile enough and being able to cut enough and be comfortable enough on that knee and on that leg, not to mention the neck injuries. He needs to be mobile and willing to run, just as we've seen in the past, to do that. As far as keeping it, I've said this before, but I'll say it again because I do think it's worth repeating. I do think that Daniel Jones could lose his job quicker than people might expect to Drew Lock if he falters as the starter in week 1. But I also would say, it would not be fair or sensible to make Daniel Jones the starter if the leash is going to be so fast that you're willing to take him out in the first or second game, right? You only, if you're going to pull Daniel Jones in the second half of the first game or the first half of the second game or whatever it is, then you misevaluated your quarterback because you shouldn't have been starting him in the first place. If you're that not confident in him, then it's not even fair to the team to start him. So I think, hopefully it bears out in training camp how well these guys are playing. And it becomes clear. I hope that answers your question. I do think his running ability, though, is key. And Kyler, you do look at, listen, when Eli Manning was, on his last legs and Daniel Jones was here, and remember, though, he was a first-round pick. So that's different than Drew Lock being here as a veteran stopgap. But that year, it was clear to me that based on my conversations, that if Eli faltered early and the team started slow, that it was very possible that they were going to pull the trigger as early as week 3. And that's exactly what they did. And you may not remember this, but I predicted that exactly to the week, about a month before it happened in the middle of training camp. Still very proud of that one. But look at the Giants' schedule. They have Minnesota and Washington to open the season, right? Those are games where you, at a minimum, if you're the Giants, you have to go 1-1 there. You're hoping you go 2-0, of course, but especially with what the schedule looks like after that, you need to win at least one of those games. So coming out of those two, let's say if Daniel Jones starts the week 1 starter, coming out of those two, if he's holding your team back, then certainly week 3 is probably not too early. But you can't make a quarterback call, that a guy's going to be your week 1 starter and pull the plug immediately on him, because that just means that you didn't pick the right guy. Or it could mean that you don't have a solution in the room at all. That's the other scary part. Mel says, we are much deeper, but we have to use this camp roster to build 25 and 26. We have been ripped off from crap contracts. DJ must concentrate on zone and blitz packages. We have speed now. Night, guys. Mills, thanks for chipping in there and dropping that in. That is something that Daniel Jones absolutely needs to focus on. Blitz packages, he needs to be ready for the unexpected. He also needs to make smart, savvy decisions when under pressure, right? He needs to make smart decisions. The bottom line is Daniel Jones, I think there was an assumption early on in his career that he was a smart quarterback who, where his cerebral ability was one of his greatest strengths. It's actually interesting that when he gets in the red zone in kind of tight quarters, sometimes his decision-making, sometimes he is a smart guy and he studies hard and he understands the game. But under the gun, when the game speeds up, his decision-making sometimes is one of his greatest weaknesses in those spots. So I absolutely agree with that. H5000 says, admittedly, it's very difficult to draft evaluate a QB. However, to build a competent O-line is fundamental. If this O-line is atrocious this year, I want Shane gone. I don't think that's an unfair comment at all. By the way, guys, I promised you I would talk about the 100th year rollout. And I did have one nugget to share with you. And if you're here now about an hour into the chat, you're going to hear it first. You may already be aware of this. I don't know. This could be like a rumor trickling around the Giants fan base as well. Or there might be some of you who are plugged in who are aware of this. But my understanding is that the Giants intend to do a huge fan fest type celebration going into their week 1 opener against Minnesota, I believe. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. I don't know if it's going to be Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but it's going to be a few days leading up to their home opener. And my understanding is they intend to go big, and there's going to be an opportunity there leading up to the home game, where the Giants are going to celebrate the 100th year right. They're going to celebrate it big, and they're going to get their fans involved. So specifics, I'm sure, will come out. I'm sure the Giants are going to do a big announcement about it. But that is something that I've heard through the grapevine, talking to some people as we get closer to the season starting. All right, let's see. Looks like we got another super sticker in the queue. If I haven't gotten to your questions yet, I will get to them. But we go to the super stickers first. Pat says, D-Kit, how honest do you think Jones is with himself about his strengths and weaknesses? Do you think he feels he's being unfairly maligned? D-Kit, that's a really good question, especially the second one. I can't speak to Daniel's mindset at this moment exactly. He did play well enough to warrant getting paid, right? And so I think that, he made his money, he earned it, and now he's at a point where he doesn't have to worry about, validating himself in that respect. I do think that if you put some truth serum in Daniel Jones's veins, he would say what any of his supporters would say, which is, listen, man, give me one season with a steady O-line and a number one wide receiver who's explosive, and then tell me you don't like my game, right? Like that, and that, because I'm really more saying that, like, if I were in his shoes, that's how I would be talking too. Daniel, like, listen, I say this all the time. Like, I saw somebody in the Voice of the People in the Daily News the other day was getting on me for my takes on Daniel. And they were claiming like I didn't like Daniel Jones or whatever. Last season, when Daniel was playing, when the Giants were losing and the offensive line was terrible early and guys were getting hurt left and right and they were losing and the offense couldn't score, I was handling the Daniel Jones element of that with kid gloves. Like, I was not trashing Daniel because I felt like he was only one of many things that were going wrong. And I felt like there were a lot of times where he didn't even have a fair chance to make a play. Daniel was the one. Daniel Jones himself was the one in the locker room. I remember like it was yesterday, who announced essentially like, stop making these other, he didn't say that, but it was like, he said, I'm not playing well enough. Like, stop asking me about this, about that. Stop saying that the protection broke down. Stop this. Like, I'm playing poorly. Like, that's basically what he said in a nutshell, paraphrasing. But he said, like, I'm not playing well enough. If I don't play well, if I don't play better, then we're not going to win games. And so, when you say, does he feel like he's being unfairly maligned? I do think he would like a shot with a strong offensive line and a number one wide receiver to show it, just like anybody would. I'm not putting words in his mouth. I'm just speculating, but I'm saying Daniel's accountable. Like, I don't see him sitting there wallowing like, oh, woe is me, they're not treating me fairly. Like, I think that he knows when he plays well and when he doesn't. Now, D-Kit, connected to them drafting a new quarterback or trying to draft Drake May, and they obviously didn't, but trying to trade up to draft Drake May, that's a whole different story, right? Like, I do think that's something that, from Jones's standpoint, probably he and his people look at it as, this is why we fought so hard for our contract, because this is what the NFL is. It's a business, right? And that's why we handled it like a business at that moment. As far as him being honest about his strengths and weaknesses, as far as him being honest with himself about his strengths and weaknesses, I think, D-Kid, I think one of his shortcomings as well is like he is such a good athlete and such a competitor that he overdoes and overextends himself. Like, a great example is some of the big hits that he takes sometimes, just like trying to get an extra yard, make an extra play. I think that when he's preparing for games and a lot of times when he's running these games and running the huddle, he is aware. But I do think he has that edge and that competitiveness that kicks in, and sometimes he overextends himself at the expense of those things. D-Kit, thanks for all the support. Chris says, what can we expect from Isaiah Simmons in a Shane Bowen defense? Well, Bowen said himself that he has to figure out exactly how he's going to fit. I think we saw last year the best way to use Isaiah, at least, the way that Wink Martindale used Isaiah, was situational blitzing He was very good covering running backs on passing downs and pass coverage, kind of that complement to a Micah McFadden where you bring him there on 3rd and longs and he provides that athletic ability. The pick 6 against Washington to end that game, to seal that game late in the season stands out. So I think that is what we need to look for there. It's not fair, in my opinion, to expect Isaiah Simmons to settle only into a safety or only into a linebacker. I think you need to look at him as a guy who's going to give you different elements of his game in situational spots. And that's just frankly the way. It is interesting, though. Shane Bowen does run more zone than what we're used to seeing under Wink. I mean, he does play some man, but he does run more zone than what we're used to seeing. And so, how does Simmons fit into that? Maybe like roving and being able to kind of use his length to cover space, right? That could help as well. John Kirk checks in with $5. Chris, thank you for that support. John says at LSU, Jaden Daniels used a virtual reality AI headset for reads and play recognition, and he really liked it. Do the Giants have anything like this? I don't know that, John. That's really interesting. I'm going to ask the Giants that on Thursday. How about that? I will ask that. I'm going to write myself a note right now so that I don't forget. There we go. I'm going to get that answer for you because that is not something I was aware of or that I had thought of. See, this is why I love these chats, man. You guys are great. Hunter says JMS also would benefit from a consistent role around him, not different players all game every week. Absolutely. And JMS would never say it, but that did not help him last year. All of those rotating bodies at guard, especially even in training camp, like he wasn't playing with the same guys near him. Patrick, what's going on? He says Saquon Barkley got his daughter to troll the Giants fans. Karma will ruin his debut. I don't think he got his daughter to do that. She's just a little girl having some fun. I wouldn't take it too seriously. Egyptian says, amazing pod, Pat. Thank you, Egyptian. Thanks for being here. Last year could have been different if first drive in Dallas ends differently. Chain of events, injuries, and close L's were awful. I still hope for another 2022 type year. Egyptian, you're absolutely right. That was kind of a comedy of errors that occurred there that led to like a catastrophic start to the season. However, there are a lot of NFL teams who suffer early setbacks and bounce back, and the Giants did not do that. And so that's true. Everything you said in that comment was true, but I don't think it's an excuse, right? And I also have said this constantly, but I do believe that the Giants need to prepare their team better for that start. I think we learned that in that game. Great comment, though. I don't disagree that, it's possible that, certainly I feel just as strongly as you do that the way the Giants start the season under Daboll so far has been the way that their season's trajectory goes. And they didn't finish 2022 strong, quote unquote, but they did win a playoff game and get to the postseason, right? After that 6-1 start and the Tennessee start. I think the way the Giants start in those first 2 weeks against Minnesota and Washington are so pivotal. It is so pivotal. No Mets, no Nets, no Jets. What's going on? Joe says, Pat, love you. Respect the old guard, New York Giants, the tuna era, 2 trophies. No doubt, man. That's the Giant way, as they say. Those are the gentlemen and the people who made the Giants what they are. Let's see. Joey B says, dude, what's up? Joey B had a great time there at the ball game. He says, just got back from Virginia. Didn't even perform, got screwed. And then this morning, my thermostat blew as I was trying to leave. $700 later, I'm home. Hi, everyone. Wow. Joey B getting screwed over going down to Virginia for a show. So sorry to hear that, Joe. Sean Lee says, what's up, Pat? So you mean to tell us that you haven't noticed the camera crew for the Hard Knock show? Sean, I was ticked off because I felt like I noticed more people there and a camera crew that looked like they worked for somebody else. And I asked the Giants who they were, and they said that they were with the team and they were Giants people. And I think that I might have been lied to because then a few days later, we find out it's Hard Knocks. So what the hell? Eric says, Pat, in the next press conference, could you push the envelope on Shane on Waller if they cut him, save 11.6 and Andrew restructure and go after corner Marshawn Lattimore? Yes, I will push him on that. Let's see. Joey B says, great seeing you and hanging with you on Saturday, Pat. That was genuinely awesome. People under the stairs. Joey, like that was great. And Joe is really somebody also who brings people together. You, as well as many other people here who are here on the chat, are one of those people who like is creating a lot of support and a groundswell for what we're doing here and what we're talking about, which I can't thank you enough. Rich says, thanks, Pat. It was a pleasure getting together there at the game. I'm starting to think the longer the Waller saga goes, the more likely it is he comes back. Because why not just announce it if he's done? Rich, that's a good question. You might be right. You might be right. I'm not going to sit here and say you're wrong. I mean, it is highly unusual. Eric says, we all know you're a Giant fan at heart. It's okay, Pat. Eric, appreciate you. Alex, what's going on? Great to see you. Thanks for being here. Joey says, Pat told me he was from Philly on Saturday, and I almost threw up. No, you did not, because you saw that I had an edge to me, right? And you said, I like the edge that you have. You do have an edge. You don't screw around. And you said, where are you from? Because you like that trait. And I said, Philly. So you liked the trait. You liked the attitude until you heard it was a Philly trait. So don't act like you didn't like it. You did. What do we got here? Looks like, did D-Kit check in again? Let's see. D-Kit, you're the man. D-Kit, constant support here. I don't have an axe to grind with Wink. Nevertheless, I heard from a Michigan booster that they are having trouble adjusting to Wink and his style. I haven't heard that, D-Kit, but that's an interesting point. The defense is more complicated than what some other people are used to. So sometimes people look at what they're seeing on the field and what's being installed, and they don't recognize it, or it doesn't make sense to them. And so then they start telling people it doesn't make sense to them. So, that's some of what we saw here in New York. So maybe not for everybody, but I do think once they hit the field and they hit the ground running, people will be happy. That's just my take. Let's see. No Met says, Waller back? Nah, we need our running backs to perform well to help relieve the pressure. That too, no doubt. Tommy says, health and wealth to all. Mike says, Pat, you routinely say Dable did a bad job last year outside of the coaching. If I told you before the season DJ would play in 6 games and Andrew Thomas plays in 10, what would you say? Well, Mike, they lost 3 close games because they didn't know how to manage them down the stretch. I mean, regardless of what happened or didn't happen, they were in 3 games they should have won, could have won. They didn't win, largely because of how the coach managed the games. So, that was the difference, right? If you go 3-0 there instead of 0-3, that's the difference between 6-11 and 9-8, right? Not to mention, Mike, I think, the job Dable did last year is just as much about how poorly he managed the staff and how much he drove a wedge through those different relationships and how poorly he managed the game days as a boss, as much as the specifics with the games as well. Tommy says, hit the like button, everyone, but what's up with DeVito talking down on management? What exactly did he say, Tommy? Can you share that? I know that Jordan wrote a piece on Tommy DeVito. I didn't get to read it yet. I do have to check in on that. So can you please share with me what he said? I did not see that exactly. Joe Freed says, transparency, 55 diehard New York Giants fan, hardcore, I bleed blue, especially the tuna era. Depth is key, boys. Need Slayton. Yeah, it's not like he's expendable for them. Mike's, let's see. Okay, we saw that already. Thank you. Let's see. Hirsch, my man. Hirsch, great to see you. Joe says, a rising tide does lift all ships. D-Kit says Hooker is 26, so he's not exactly a young quarterback. Ryan, thanks for the congratulations on what we're doing here on the channel. You're a huge part of it now as well. AJ likes Jones. Tommy says, Jones has definitely put up with the most and has been the best professional when it comes to the fan base hate. Hate the criticism, the scrutiny, the slander, incapable upper management that has let him down. Yeah, that's fair too. I think it all goes into the pot. He's culpable, but also it's gotten nasty out there. Chris says, so we know Edge will be Kayvon and Burns. How are we feeling about Ojulari, Fox, or anyone else? Aziz, if he stays healthy, is a better pass rusher, pure pass rusher, bendy pass rusher than Kayvon. He struggled to stay healthy, though. Tamon Fox is a guy that just couldn't get on the field last year. I know, there was a push from some people on the staff to get him on the field, and they never got him onto the game day roster. So I don't know if that's going to change, but he was kind of being held back and off the field by the current regime right now. So hard to explain because he did play pretty well as a rookie. Savage Steve he's in Tennessee and he's a big whiskey fan. Got to check that Kentucky Bourbon Trail out. Oh, no doubt. No doubt. Terry Hall says, good evening, Pat. What is the mood around the O-line? I wanted to check in on Evan Neal's progress. Terry, frankly, I'll have a better answer for you on Thursday, but I can tell you that one thing that we're looking for to rise to the top is the leadership. Specifically, I think JMS and John Runyon Jr. are two guys I'm looking at. Specifically Runyon Jr., but I'm looking at those two guys to step up and lead because Andrew Thomas he's a lead by example guy, right? He's your best player. Illuminor, maybe, I don't know, Stinney. I don't know much about Stinney, but I know Runyon comes with that reputation. And John Michael Schmitz, that was part of the evaluation and the selection of him as high as the second round. So I think you're looking for that. And that is, that's the conversation right now is, are those guys going to step up? Looks like they are aware from my vantage point of the fact that they are those guys and need to be those guys. And so that's where it's going. But to get specifically to Evan Neal and the progress there, hoping for more on that on Thursday when we go to the OTA number 3, which is the first one open to the media. Chris says, any word on Aaron Robinson, his injury rehab plans going forward? Nothing, Chris. I mean, listen, I'll be totally honest. Given Aaron Robinson is a player who I think his ceiling is fairly low, even if he's optimally healthy and performing, I do not think there should be, expectations for him as far as being a major contributor this year. Now, that said, Aaron Robinson was at the charity softball game supporting Dexter Lawrence there. So it was actually good to see him out and about. Didn't get a chance to talk to him, though. But we'll look into that more. Miz, what's going on? He says Jones MVP. Jones is a gym rat. Gym rats heal fast, no doubt. Tommy says, Miz, they hate Jones even if the guy shows up every game. G-Men says, Miz, as you know, we root for the guys in blue. Jones is our quarterback. Hope he effing crushes it. Patrick Evans says, hey, Pat, as always, love the show. Thanks, Pat. He says, what is the status of Aaron Robinson? I haven't heard anything about him if he's even still with the Giants. He was a good slot corner. He is still with the Giants. He was there over the weekend at the softball game. He's still around. The Giants haven't provided much of an update about what he's able to do. So we should get more of an answer to that as we see some of these open OTAs. But I would say, Aaron Robinson conversation reminds me kind of when I covered the Rangers, a lot of times the fans, if let's say a third line winger was struggling, the fans always wanted one of the top AHL forwards to be promoted and moved up to the Rangers roster in the NHL. And it's always hey, listen, if the guy was ready, he'd be there, So that's how I see Aaron Robinson is he good enough, even healthy, to yank a roster spot away from someone and be ultimately reliable and a shutdown guy? I don't think that's a given or even something that he ever showed when he was on the field. So I would not have high expectations or outsized expectations for that. Although certainly if you do get something from him, it's a bonus and it helps. T says Jones absolutely does have to validate himself after last year. Taylor and DeVito both played better behind the O-line than DJ. Oh, yeah, no, T, I wasn't sorry. I don't know if I wasn't clear. I wasn't saying Jones doesn't have to validate or prove himself. Obviously, he has to play better. I was saying more Daniel's the first one to say that he does. That's what I was saying. The line did get better when Taylor went in there compared to what it was when Daniel was in there before that injury. But Tyrod was the best quarterback on the roster last year. DeVito took about 1,000 sacks, but he did throw some touchdown passes and some key passes in key spots during a defense-led 3-game winning streak before, kind of the carriage turned into a pumpkin, so to speak. Maximus Jones will hoist up the trophy, screaming out, "Are y'all not entertained?" Play calling completely let him down. Kafka Johnson was the worst. Daboll did great changing his title and taking over plays. So Tommy buying fully everything that Brian Daboll is selling there. Obviously, a lot riding on what Brian Daboll does as a head coach and a play caller this season. Everything, really. T says, for such a great athlete, how come Jones does not know how to slide properly? T, that's what I was alluding to when we talked about the intelligence and decision making. Daniel's a smart person, but in some of these moments, he gets overly competitive and he doesn't do the sound thing, whether it's throwing into coverage too quickly or whether it's taking on a player, taking a hit, trying to run a guy over, whatever it is, taking a big hit. Like, those are things he has to work on and he hasn't figured out completely. Francis says, exactly, give the guy a chance. This is his year. From your personal observation, DJ sounds grounded. I suspect he understands the situation he's in. Daniel Jones is a very grounded individual, Francis. No doubt about it. Chronicles, what's up? He says, Pat, what's up? Great seeing you on Saturday at the Sexy Dexy game. Got some nice autographs and great player interactions with Tay Banks, Nacho, Wandale Robinson, JMS, Dre Phillips, and Nick McLeod. Every guy you just listed, Chronicles, is a great guy. That does not surprise me. You're also very personable and a diehard Giants fan, so I'm sure they loved chatting with you as well. Chronicles says, great event out on put on by LPG, and cool, that's license plate guy, I'm sure everybody here knows that, and cool how close the players got, and the best event to interact with players I've been to. Wow, high praise there from Chronicles. I'll pass that along to LPG, though I'm sure you have as well. The play calling first half of last year was the worst spread out offense. Like, we had Patrick Mahomes Jordan back there, no 12 and 13 personnel to help O-line. They forced it for millions. They gave Jones, says Tommy. Tommy, Daboll was involved in all of that game planning. I know Kafka was the one calling the plays on game day, but remember, Daboll took play calling away from him, was calling the plays at different times himself, also gave it to Shea Tierney once. So it wasn't always Kafka calling the plays either. Daboll was involved in the offense more than you think last year, and those were the results. So I would not say that. Let's see. Do you know if the Giants have upgraded anything to help prevent injuries to players, says Beast of the East? No, I do not know. I'm going to do more on that, Beast. I'm constantly working on that, and we'll be writing about that come training camp, if not before. Nabers says, hey, Pat, what are the expectations for Kayvon under this revamped defense? Nabers, I think the expectations are for him to be a sound run stopper who also gets to the quarterback. Last year, I think his edge setting suffered. Some of those fundamentals weren't there like they had been in the first year, but obviously he improved by leaps and bounds as a pass rusher. So I think what the expectations for him is to put it all together, help them stop the run first, and then be a guy who gets to the quarterback quickly at times and wins those 1-on-1s. Tommy says, Liam Thompson, I pray he stays on practice squad. If his game translates, he is a gem, real gunslinger. I believe, Tommy, he was just a let's see. Let me look at Liam Thompson's status on the roster here. What are we looking at? Yeah, I think he was just a tryout. Pretty sure he was just a tryout. That's what I was going to say, but I double-checked it before I said it. Joey B says, what was my interaction when you said Philly? Tell the people, sir. Hey, Joey, I remember you just being kind of nodding, like approving. Chronicle says, Tommy DeVito did not talk down. He just said he has to prove himself to them again. I mean, even though he had that magical ride, there's not like anybody who's going to suggest that he's more than what he is just not watching the games. That's no offense to Tommy. And everybody's happy for Tommy. Ryan joking that D-Kid looks to have cashed in his 401k. Just being a huge supporter, man. The man. D-Kid says, so $20 is your limit, Ryan? Get a new job. Oh, man, some feistiness in the chat tonight. Okay. Let's see. Tommy says DeVito was more on some. He deserves to be more than a third stringer. I don't think so. I don't think, like, you go back and watch those games again. Watch how many sacks he took that he didn't need to take. He was not ready to play in the NFL. It's a miracle they won some of those games. Chronicle says Daniel Jones wasn't there at the softball game on Saturday, but DeVito and Locke were. Says a lot, just saying. That was interesting. I don't know what it says, but that's the truth. What Chronicles just said is the truth. Nabers says it feels like Daboll was trying to take the next step out of his offense when the rest of the team wasn't ready. Nabers, that is a great point. Daboll was trying to take the next step with his offense and open it up and turn it into something more. And the team, the personnel, the roster wasn't ready. He completely misjudged that. And this is a whole operation, right? It's everybody. But I totally agree with you. That is a really smart comment by you. Ryan is laughing down here at D-Kid's comment. Some great trash talk going on. I love it. Let's see. Kyler says, when play calling switched hands last season, what did you notice that was different between the three coaches, if any, meaning personal and style of offense? Well, Kyler, the main thing I noticed that stuck out was during the Dallas game when Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton were yelling at Mike Groh on the sideline, and there was a lot of frustration on the sideline. In that second half, when Shea Tierney got the play calling, he spent the entire last drive throwing the ball to Sterling Shepard. Like, it was almost like, from my vantage point, it was like they were trying to fix what could become a locker room issue if they didn't make Shep a little bit happier. That's what it looked like to me. You know what I mean? It also looked like somebody who's not used to calling plays, forcing the ball to one player like that. It was very strange. And then with Daboll, I mean, if you look at like the Seattle game, like a point in that Seattle game, there was, what was that? I believe when Daniel threw that interception in the red zone, I believe Daboll was calling plays at that point. So what you see is just he's crazy invested in the result, and you see more like emotional reactions. As far as like what the play calling is, I think you see, it's pass heavy. It's getting Daniel out mobile on the run. I mean, Kafka's not going completely rogue when he's calling plays. Like, this is the thing. This is a myth. Like, this idea that Mike Kafka's going rogue as a play caller and Brian Daboll doesn't have any, say on the matter in game days, like, is not true. But Kyler, that's a really great question. Terry says, Pat, do you think Nabers can have a rookie year like Chase and Jefferson? Terry, that's going to be tough. I mean, you need the quarterback play, right? You're a wide receiver. Someone's got to get you the ball. He is the guy above and beyond anyone else on the offense, though. So I could easily see him getting force-fed the ball. But then again, like, Darren Waller felt like a guy last year was going to be force-fed the ball, and then you just didn't even see it happen early, even when he was healthy on the field. So still got to execute, but I don't think he's going to have a Chase Jefferson-type rookie year. But I do think he's going to have an encouraging year in different spots. I do think he's going to make some big plays. Like, maybe he'll have some games that are disappointing, but then the next week he'll score an 80-yard touchdown, right? Or maybe he'll be having a slow day and then pop one for 60 yards. Like, I think he's that kind of player who can turn a bad day into a good day quickly, which is something that the Giants need. Saquon, frankly, was like that as a running back too, right? Like a guy who could be going, 11 carries for 22 yards and then break off a 40 or 50-yard run, and then his stats look better, right? D-Kid says, anyone who doesn't think Daboll is in full control of the offensive system is not watching. Well said, D-Kid. Joey B says that when I told him I was from Philly, he said, ew. When? But yes, love the edge, brother. Any decent names you think we'd go after that are left on the free agent vet market? I know you guys ask this a lot, and I wish I had more specific answers for you every time we do these, but nothing doing on that right now. D-Kit says, Pat, they didn't do us any favors with the scheduling. As you mentioned earlier, that stretch of games after the first Commanders game is brutal. Yeah, I mean, I actually think Dallas's schedule is brutal early. Like their first 6. I mean, the Cowboys have a worse schedule up front than the Giants. I do think the NFL D-Kit, even though I think that the Giants opponents as a whole lays out as just it's not easy in any order that you're putting it in, really. But I do think compared to some of the other teams, like getting Minnesota, Washington 1-2, so getting another projected last place finisher, having to come to your building without an elite quarterback in week 1, that's better than what it could have been. And then getting Washington early with a rookie quarterback and a first-year head coach before they get a little bit comfortable, that's better than what it could have been too. I just think that their schedule is pretty hard. I mean, it's not the hardest schedule I've ever seen, but I think when their schedule of opponents came out, there were some people saying that it looked favorable. And I remember pushing it back against that on these chats immediately, saying are you sure about that? The meme, you sure about that? Nabers says, stormed upstairs during the Seattle game, then calmed down, went back downstairs, boom, pick 6. That's right. D-Kit, what are your thoughts about Jordan Phillips? Haven't heard much about him since we acquired him. He was a good player when healthy. I think the best you can hope from him is solid run stopping and, again, a veteran mentor leadership element. I think he's going to be your A'Shawn Robinson. A'Shawn was a guy who gave you some good football in spurts, but by and large did not make them a better or a great run-stopping team. So I don't expect Jordan Phillips to completely turn around the interior of their defensive line or replace, let's say, what Leonard Williams was giving you, that kind of thing, obviously. What I need Jordan Phillips to be if I'm the Giants is healthy, right? Because you need depth there, even if Nacho Nunez Roches and Jordan Phillips and whoever else you're pairing with Dexter Lawrence in the middle, even if none of them are what Leonard Williams would have been, you need those guys to stay healthy enough to keep bodies fresh and make sure Lawrence doesn't have to play, 100% of the snaps. Tommy says, it seems as if the trenches are being built properly and a more productive group our season can rely on both sides of the ball dominating at any stretch of the season. Washington, Cleveland, Dallas, Seattle, Cincinnati, Philly, Pittsburgh. That's tough. Yeah, and I mean, you hope that the Eagles losing Fletcher Cox and Jason Kelce to retirement helps even that rivalry, especially as you're trying to build up your trenches as well. That's something I'm watching in that rivalry. Joey B says, only guy I'm really worried about our O-line facing is Myles Garrett. What about Dallas's pass rush? It kills the Giants all the time. I agree with you, though. Early on, you look at that schedule, and the first thing that stands out to you is that Cleveland game, right? That jumps out at you. But I think, Dallas coming in, I mean, TJ Watt in Pittsburgh, you're not afraid of that? Come on. Myles Garrett is going to be scary. Guys, this has been a great chat. For a May 20th live chat, the amount of engagement, the amount of super chats and super stickers, the amount of support that you guys have shown, the amount of knowledge you guys have on this team, and the I was going to say inspiration, but it's inspirational to me how engaged you guys are at this point in the offseason. This is OTA number 1 is in the books, and you guys are all over this team. Honestly, I'm blown away. Joey B talking trash on the Cowboys. Tommy says Thomas will do fine with the new left guard next to him. I'm not concerned about Andrew, as throughout the course of the season if he's healthy. Who has more wins, Pat? Says D-Kit, us or the Panthers? D-Kit, I see the Giants and the Panthers in the same class of team battling at the top of the draft next year. So I don't know who finishes with more wins. I do think Bryce Young hasn't yet played any high level of NFL football. Daniel Jones, whatever you want to say about him, has at different points in his career. So I think that the Giants, you have to, fade the Panthers if you were forcing me to make a pick there for sure. But, I see them in the same category, unfortunately. Joe says Daniel Jones' biggest concerns are ball protection, interceptions, fumbles, giving game away. Yeah, you can't shoot yourself in the foot. But, Joe, in the past, there have been other Giants head coaches and coordinators who have tried to protect Daniel from himself in making those mistakes. And what they've done is they've also taken the playmaking away with it, right? So what you have to do is get his best football out of him without putting the clamps on him, right? So prevent the turnovers and the killer mistakes, but you have to do it while also opening it up. Let's see. All right, we're coming down the stretch of this chat here. We're finishing strong, as always, here on Talkin Ball Live. Thank you so much for being here, guys. If you're listening on audio on the Believe Network, on Apple or Spotify, thank you as well. Chronicle says, Pat, again, thanks for taking the time to talk on Saturday at the game. Meant a lot to just talk life and ball. Shout out to Joey B., also part of our great convo. Great time and great event, no doubt, Chronicles. Tommy says, Bracillo will definitely make life easier for Evan Neal. He learns balance, technique, leverage, using his length and strength properly. For some reason, Johnson and Kafka's scheme didn't work well with one another. Tommy, it's not Kafka's scheme. It's Brian Daboll's scheme. I promise you. Rich says, what kind of position do you see us adding in free agency during the summer? I'd be excited for Calais or Adoree. We need help at those positions. I think inside linebacker depth, defensive tackle depth, corner, that other outside corner spot is the one I'm looking at the most. And, I wouldn't hate defensive line reinforcement. Joey B says, thanks for another good one, Pat. It was the perfect way to relax after the crap weekend I had. See you again Thursday. Yeah, sorry you had to deal with that, Joey. Nabers says, I agree the picks are a problem with Jones, but I also feel he is way too conservative and refuses to push the ball down the field. Yeah, right. You can't have him scared to do those things, so you can't coach out of him trying to make plays. Ash says, if we are picking at the top of the draft, I don't know how Daboll survives. He would not if they were picking that high. Terry says, Pat, what game will be a better first game at Giant Stadium versus Dallas Thursday night or against the Eagles? Good question. I'm going to say the Eagles because the Giants beat them recently and they haven't beaten Dallas in a long time. They just can't stop Dallas's offense. And I think maybe there's a mental edge against the Eagles, at least early, to make it competitive and feel like without Kelsey and Fletcher Cox, that they can compete. And also Saquon, Saquon's going to have an edge, but the Giants are going to bring one too. I'll say Saquon, and the Eagles game will be a closer game. D-Kit says, you're the best, Pat. See you on Thursday. Come loaded with info, please. D-Kit, thanks for all the super chats and the support. Really appreciate you. Thanks for saying that. D-Kit makes a good point, and I'll get to the rest of the questions before I finish. But, guys, Thursday night, it's either going to be, FYI, either 9 p.m. or 9:30. So it's just a busy evening. I'm going to try to make it 9 p.m., but if it's not 9 p.m., I'm going to go 9:30. But that's the first OTA we get to watch in person as the media. And so I'm going to be out there on the field taking notes, talking to players, talking to coaches, and I'm going to come loaded with observations from that practice. And so we'll bring it directly to you guys. So I'll do some stuff on social media during practice. I'll write for the Daily News, but I'll be bringing the goods here. That's what we do. Chronicle says, did you guys get to talk to any other players on Sunday than just Burns? Yeah, Wandale and Dexter, but Burns was the best interview for sure. Tommy says, Bowen hasn't had this amount of talent to work with. Dex, Thibodeau, Burns, Bobby O, Banks, Pinnock, McLeod, Belton, Aziz. I think Fox, Simmons will shine. All right. Chronicle says it's obvious that it's Daboll's offense. Been that way since day one he got here. It's just been Kafka calling it. Exactly. Chris says, everyone, don't forget to come back on Thursday after OTAs when the media is allowed in. Exactly, Chris. Thank you for reminding everyone. A. West says, hey, Pat, thanks for the stream. You're welcome, A. West. Thank you. D-Kid says, Pat, maybe Ryan will dig in his pocket, open his dusty wallet, and make a contribution, or maybe pigs will fly. Oh, man. Yo, if I thought, I didn't think these things could get any better, but now we got pretty elite trash talk going. This is great. Tommy says, well, the Daboll Johnson fit was working poorly. Kafka had gadget plays that just wouldn't work with the talent we had, but shame on Daboll for the poor play calling last year. It was the worst first half year, no doubt. Joey B says, Pat, you should bring some current and former Giants players on these lives with us to ask some questions and such. I don't know, just an idea. As we grow, the more we will do, Joey, I promise you. Joey B looking for that media badge. I still got it, Joey B. Maybe we'll get that to you one day from the Sexy Dexy event. Chronicle says, man, I hope Wandale can put together a good year. I do as well. I know one thing. I feel like he could play professional baseball watching him hit at that softball game, no doubt. Guys, it's been great being here. Thank you, everybody, for turning out at the Dexter Lawrence charity softball game and interacting and talking. Rich, Joe, Chronicles, everybody, really appreciated you guys. Oh, D Kit guilted Chris Peace into a $2 super chat. D Kit doing the Lord's work. Really appreciate you. The man, D Kit crushing it. I love it. Tommy says, how does Tracy fit with the play calling and Singletary at running back 1? Definitely as a dual threat pass catching ability, athletic. Hard for rookie running backs to master a complicated playbook and factor in a major way, but there's obviously an opportunity for Tyrone Tracy Jr. I think kick return is the first place he ends up contributing. Yeah, Chris, let's go. And Chronicles asked me, was I there when the Oregon and UCLA pitcher came at the softball game? No, I was not. Had to jet early. I had to be at a travel baseball game. Family comes first, but that was great. Let's see. Kayvon's thing is definitely not softball. That was obvious. No doubt. No, I'll give him credit for walking out there and swinging a bat like he was in public. I would not have been doing that if I was him. D-Kit says, if we can get Pat over 10,000 subscribers, he will guarantee Dex on this channel. Right, Pat? Oh, D-Kit. We're getting Dex on this channel anyway. Don't worry about it. It's happening. But, yes, I will guarantee if we're over 10K, the more that we have, the more it just reinforces itself. So, the more followers and the more participation we get on these channels and these chats and this podcast, the more followers, the more likes, the more subscriptions, the more that people understand the reach that we have, and they're on more and more. But we've already had Bobby Okereke, Darius Slayton. We had Paris Campbell, Lawrence Cager on last year. We had Sterling Shepard on last year. We've had Barry Sanders, Phil Simms, Chris Canty, on and on. I mean, it's a long list. Obviously, Adam Schefter, but it's going to keep growing. And, Brian Burns actually sounds like a guy who's going to be fun to have on. Tyler Nubin is a guy I want to have on too. He's really, really interesting to talk to, a good interview. Yes, D Banks is a phenomenal dodgeball player. Oh, D Kid say it has to be on a live chat. I don't know if Dex will do a live chat, but listen, if you guys get me to 10K, I will work my butt off to make that happen. I'm already working my butt off to make that stuff happen. Chronicle says Brian Burns and Banks and Wandale were the most interactive at the softball game. Burns especially loved it, signed for a lot of fans, and was happy doing it, same as Banks and Wandale. No doubt. Joe says Manning had a 52% fumble ratio. Jones had a 76 fumble ratio. Tommy says Dex is a monster. That SMU kid Elijah next to him in the backfield, or is backfield disruption all game long. All right, guys, this has been an amazing chat. Thank you so much, especially to everybody with the super stickers, super chats, J-Jan, Rich, Ryan, Salient, D-Kit bringing it, obviously, and also guilting Chris into spending, John, and everybody who asked a question, everyone who complimented, everyone who contributed to this chat and made it better. I appreciate you. Remember, we are going to be back here on Thursday. That'd be Thursday, May 23rd, after the Giants' first open OTA practice. And I will be going live. That's either going to be 9 p.m. or 9:30 p.m. that we're going to go live on the 23rd on Thursday here on the Talkin Ball Pat Leonard YouTube channel, Talkin Ball Live. Remember, we are sponsored by Bet Online, also by Estate 98 Coffee. It's an Essentia Day Cafe from El Salvador. Dates back to 98. And tune in for a special podcast coming out tomorrow, Tuesday, May 21st. Sandro Platzgummer, the former Giants running back, now on the Frankfurt Galaxy in Germany, obviously from Austria originally. Great guy. Got to know him well when he was on the Giants. He came on the podcast today. We recorded about a 45-minute episode, only appropriate, of course, because the Giants are going to Germany in November. So Sandro gave us great insight into what to do and where to go in Munich. He told us about his medical career, told us about his playing career. We reflected on his time with the Giants, talked about the NFL, talked about Saquon to the Eagles, and on and on. D-Kit ends us with contribute, you cheap bums. Daily news doesn't pay well. And with that, I am out of here. See you later. Have a good evening. Thank you as always, everybody.